Hey guys, it's Camera Review for the series finale of Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 6, The Iron Throne. And look, going into this finale, yes, I really did love last week's episode. You know, it took me a while, but I warmed up to it. I like where they were headed. It was definitely a very bold decision for sure, but it was one that I was able to get behind. That being said, though, I was still very worried going into this finale because, of course, the way things left off, we ended things with a major shift in terms of the storytelling, in terms of what this show was, you know, really about, what we were going to accomplish. And just knowing what they set up and, you know, this shift that they took, asking any finale to wrap all of that up in 80 minutes, it seems a bit difficult. It doesn't really seem like it's going to work out very well. And I actually reviewed this episode last night. I, watched it and everything, but I didn't really think it was a very good review. I thought there were quite a few things that I just didn't really talk about. There was a lot of stuff that I got wrong, and I just don't think it was a very good way to sum things up. So I wanted to do it again, and so I took the night. I said, you know what? If I feel differently about this episode in the morning, I'm going to re-review this episode. And honestly, I took the night, I thought about it, and I came to the conclusion that, sadly, I really don't like this finale. Look, this is not at all a bad finale. There are things that I do like about it. There's quite a lot I do like about it, but as a whole, it's very disappointing. It is not at all the satisfying finale that we were expecting this show to give us. It feels very rushed. It wasn't very eventful either. There wasn't really a lot happening in this finale either. But we're just going to get into it right now. And like I said, you'd think maybe this being the finale, there's a lot of stuff that happened, and it's going to be a very long video. And in a sense, yeah, there is definitely stuff that happened, but a lot of what happened, there just wasn't a lot happening in that way. Like, there were definitely a lot of events, but there's not a lot to talk about, if that makes any sense. But I will say, 25 to 30 minutes of this episode were legitimately great. I thought they were fantastic. I loved what they were doing, and I was like, wow, this is going to be a great finale. It starts off incredibly bleak, but probably my favorite sequence of this entire episode actually is the first 10 minutes, and what we get is essentially what we got with Arya last week, except it's with Tyrion this time. Basically, he is, walking amongst all the rubble, all of just the devastation, all of the people who have just been slaughtered. There are people who are very severely burnt because of what Daenerys has done, and you can just see him, and he is just shocked at what she has done and how much she has just completely destroyed King's Landing. I mean, he knew the city was going to burn, but he did not anticipate that she would do something this ghastly and this inhumane. And it's a very good way to start things off, especially someone like Tyrion, who we know he was trying to prevent this. He was trying to do whatever he could to make sure that things did not escalate to this very violent and just very devastating manner, but unfortunately it did. But that's not the moment that really did get me. And in fact, the only moment that really did get me emotionally in this episode is when he goes to the Red Keep, and he sees Jaime and Cersei, and he sees that they're dead, and he's taken the bricks off them. And honestly, I don't know if it was Peter Dinklage's acting, I don't know if it was the score, but this scene did get me. I mean, look, yes, Cersei was not a good person. Cersei did a lot of terrible things. She was very devious. She was very self-centered. She very much was someone who just very much disregarded a lot of people's happiness and things like that in service of her own. And yes, she definitely did a lot of terrible things to the Starks. I mean, she was behind the Red Wedding and things like that. But she still was his sister, and regardless of all the terrible things she did, he still saw her as his sister, and he knew that she wasn't a good person, but he wanted to try to keep his family together. He wanted to at least have Jaime and Cersei reunite. He knew that those two loved each other, and even though he didn't agree with what Cersei was doing, and he did want her to abdicate, he didn't want her to be on the throne anymore, he at least wanted her to get out of this alive, and to just see him just completely just emotionally destroyed by what happened. I mean, this was a place that he once saw as his home. These were his siblings. It once was a place of solace. It once was a place of happiness, and now it's just a complete war zone, and it's basically just a complete dump at this point, and you just see just how broken Tyrion is in this scene. I thought just was so great here, and Peter Dinklage's acting, not just in this scene, but throughout this entire episode, was off the charts, and I thought he definitely elevated this entire episode for me, and I just thought this was a fantastic way to start things off. It perfectly gives you that bleak tone that this episode is trying to convey, and I thought they did a very good job with that here. But very quickly, Daenerys does learn of Tyrion's betrayal. He throws the pin down. He's not going to support her anymore, but she's not going to stand for it. She decides to keep him held captive as a prisoner, and I heard a lot of people say, oh, why didn't she just kill Tyrion right then and there? And sure, that could have worked, but the narrative that they were trying to do, it makes sense to keep Tyrion alive. And sure, maybe it was a little convenient that, oh, everyone else, they're just, she says Dracarys and they're immediately torched, and Tyrion probably would have suffered the same fates, but in service of the story, I'm not upset about that. There are quite a few things I am upset about with this episode. That's not one of them. I thought that did make sense, and the moment where you can just see, and I thought he was going to try to kill her, like when he was pulling out that pin, I thought he was going to try to pull a fast one on her, but it didn't happen. Like, he didn't even attempt to kill her in that moment, but he is held as prisoner, and we get a moment that I actually really wanted to happen. There was actually a part of last week's review where, after my whole thing about me saying that, we should judge the show not based on what we want to happen, but what should happen, and one of the things I decided to cut out of that review, because I thought it was being hypocritical, is something I did actually want to see happen. It's something that I felt needed to happen in this episode, and that's the conversation between Tyrion and Jon. I wanted to see these two have a conversation. I wanted to see these two talk about, everything that happened with Daenerys, and they do, and I really like the way this was done, with Tyrion basically telling Jon that, like, he should have saw this coming, that Varys was right, and he feels bad that he didn't listen to Varys, and that he wishes this could have gone differently, and you can just see that Tyrion is very regretful that he did trust Daenerys, and you can understand why, because of the things that he's had to do. I mean, Tyrion himself, he's done some things like, killing his father and killing Shay and things like that. And I really like the way we actually went back to that. I thought it was a really great moment for Tyrion to be like, holy shit, I am almost just as bad as Daenerys, and I led myself down a darker path, and he's kind of the one that has encouraged her to do it. He's encouraged her to go after those that need to be liberated or something like that. And I thought there was a really great moment, and I really did like the way that was done. And going as far as to say that because of the things he's done, he doesn't feel he should come out of this alive. He doesn't really feel like he should come out of this a free man. The other times, yeah, he suggested a trial by combat. This is now the third time that Tyrion has been a man on trial. But this time, he kind of wants to come out of this dead because he feels guilty. He feels like he allied with this tyrant, and he knows the dark things that he's done as well. So in many ways, he feels like, obviously equating that to what Daenerys has done, there's a very big difference there for sure. But considering the type of person that Tyrion is, I can understand why he does feel that way, and I thought they did a very good job with that. But like I said with Jon, I just thought he was acting out of character. It did not seem like him to just suddenly rationalize, especially after having that epiphany, or at least it seemed like having an epiphany in that, episode last week. It just didn't make sense that he was sort of, he was kind of for what she was doing and he was still supporting her. But regardless, I really liked that we got to see this scene. This was a scene that I feared we weren't going to be able to get because it was only 80 minutes, but thankfully we did, and I relished every second of it. I thought the two of them worked so well together. Like I said, Peter Dinklage's acting was just so great, and I love that we got to have this scene between them. I really love what they were able to do there. Now, of course, the big thing, though, that I think a lot of people really were looking forward to is what the hell they were going to do with Daenerys now, because the entire show, they've been painting her as a hero, someone we're supposed to be rooting for, but now she's turned dark, and I have to say, I don't really think that they gave her enough in this episode. We do get an idea of her plan. Essentially, she's Thanos. Like, that's the best way to sum it up. She basically wants to do what Thanos did. She wants to, now that they have destroyed King's Landing, she wants to quote-unquote liberate the rest of Westeros. She feels like they need to rebuild. She feels like she needs to help anyone else that has been victimized in that way, and basically just feels she needs to kill everyone. And again, similar to how Thanos wanted to eliminate half the population in order for them to thrive, Dany just wants to kill basically everyone. Anyone that's not willing to bend the knee and things like that. I mean, you might as well just given her an Infinity Gauntlet. Like, she basically was just Thanos if he was not as well developed, and that really leads me to my biggest problem with the Daenerys stuff, is that she just didn't feel like a character in this episode. She felt much more like a plot device, like, oh, now we just gotta stop her. And considering that this was such a major shift, and there still were a lot of people that weren't behind it, I myself like the decision, but I don't think they gave us enough time. We needed to spend a lot more time with seeing Daenerys and her rationalizing what she was doing and seeing her in full tyrannical mode. And if they were just giving us like 2 or 3 more scenes, I would have absolutely been on board with it. And I just think that they did not give us enough there, and I was a little disappointed by that overall. But it is all pretty much made up for with this next scene where she finally does get to the Iron Throne. She actually does get to, sit. She doesn't get to sit, but she almost touches the Iron Throne. She's basically gotten everything she's wanted at this point. Cersei's gone, King's Landing's completely destroyed. She is now the great ruler at this point. The Dothraki, Grey Worm, everyone is supporting her. Everyone seems to be on her side at this point. Grey Worm is even going as far as to kill people that, kill any of the remaining soldiers in King's Landing and behead them, even though there's no reason for it. So again, I mean, she in a sense has really gotten everything she's wanted, as fucked up as it really is. But even at that, we get this moment with Jon, and I thought this scene was perfect. I love the way this was done, because like I said, at first I thought Jon was being an idiot, where he is kind of rationalized, but that's not what he does. Instead, he tries to get her to come to her senses, and he's like, really think about what you're doing here. Like, sure, I understand you wanted to, liberate King's Landing, but you slaughtered all these innocent victims. And you can tell that he is enraged with what she's doing. He is disappointed by what she was doing. He stuck by her. This was his queen. This is someone that he does, in fact, care about, but he just can't support her in this way. So what he decides to do, she does, in fact, tell him what she's going to do. It seems like he's going to ally with her, and right as they do embrace, that is when Jon realizes that there is no holding back, and he actually does kill Daenerys in this scene. So essentially what I wanted to happen with Jaime in the last episode is what happened with Jon here, where he misled Tyrion into thinking that he was supporting her. At least it seemed that way to me. Maybe Tyrion was able to convince him. I'm not really sure. If he was, then that really doesn't make any sense with Jon's epiphany and things like that. But he does, in fact, stab her, and that's it. That's the end of Daenerys. We get this fantastic scene where Drogon, we see he is also really upset at what happened. I thought he was gonna just kill Jon right there. It seemed like he was about to just roast him, but I saw it as he doesn't think Daenerys would want him to do that. Jon is one of the only people that she felt close to. Jon is one of the only people she felt like she had a future with, and, I think Drogon kind of knew, Daenerys would not have liked if he did that. So he burns the Iron Throne, basically thinking, if Daenerys can't sit on the Iron Throne, no one can, so that's completely laid to waste. He takes off with Daenerys' body, and I thought that was such an effective scene, and here's the thing. Sure, Drogon committed mass destruction. A lot of that was very much him being instructed by Daenerys, but if you really think about it, Drogon is really the one that has lost the most at this point. I mean, Viserion's gone, Obviously Rhaegal's gone, and now Daenerys is gone. He has nothing. Like, he has no purpose anymore. There's no reason for Drogon to still be there. And that moment where he was, he was lightly tapping Daenerys, just making sure that she was, there was a possibility, just even a hope that she was alive. It was really sad to see, for sure. I definitely did feel for Drogon in that scene. I think they did a very good job of that. And for Jon, too. I mean, you can see that Jon, he also feels very guilty because this was his queen. And this was someone that he did support. And he kind of feels like he got her here. And he does feel guilty for it. He's realizing that Sansa and Arya were right in that moment. I think also Jon saw it as, because she was his queen, he was the only one that could stop it. He was the only one that could get her to possibly abdicate. I think his mission is that he was going to try to get her to abdicate, and because she didn't abdicate, that's why he decided to ultimately just offer right then and there. And it's a very satisfying moment for sure. You can tell how emotional it was for Jon, but I thought that scene was perfection, and I really did love the way that was done here. So in terms of the first, like I said, half of the episode, I really was liking it. I was loving where they were going. I thought that the Jon and Daenerys stuff was very well done. I actually thought for a little bit that maybe Daenerys was going to win. I mean, the bleak tone that they were sort of, looming over the entire episode, I thought that's where we were heading. I really thought that there was a chance that Daenerys was actually able to convince Jon, and that Jon just, stood by her because his mortals got in the way of that. If they were to end it that way, that would have made perfect sense, and I would have been satisfied with that, but that's not what they did, of course. It didn't end that way. And I'm glad that things wrapped up the way they did, and I was overall satisfied with that. There still were a few things that I didn't really love. Arya being here really served no purpose whatsoever. I mean, you thought that maybe she was going to go to Daenerys and possibly was going to try to kill her, but I like that she didn't. It made sense from a narrative perspective why she didn't do that because of what Sandor said to her. It shows that what he said did have an impact and that she is taking what he said to heart, which I liked, and I thought it made sense why she didn't end up killing Daenerys in that moment. But aside from that, I was really loving the first half. The second half of the episode, though, not really the case. There is a lot that I had an issue with in this part of the episode. Right off the bat, I mean, we have this really weird cut from Jon killing Daenerys and Drogon flying off and Jon feeling, both sort of satisfied that it's over, but also a sense of guilt that he did do it and that he did have to kill his queen. You could tell that he was trying to keep himself from doing it, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So to cut from that to this really sort of funny scene of the council and them trying to figure out, what's next, it just felt very weird and it felt very off. And honestly, the first, 25 to 30 minutes, that should have been the ending of last week's episode. That's how last week's episode should have ended. It should have ended with Jon killing Daenerys. We should have ended it there, and then we should have began this new episode, and you still could have done this time jump, which, let me just say, I was very confused, when exactly this was supposed to take place. In fact, when Tyrion was having that conversation with Jon, and he said, I'll see you in 10 years, I actually thought they were going to cut to, 10 years later, but they didn't do that. Instead, there's this time jump. I guess it's been a few weeks or a month or something like that. It hasn't been that long, but it's definitely been long enough that Tyrion has a much thicker beard. Jon also has a much thicker beard, and basically, we got pretty much everyone from Winterfell. Sansa's there, Brienne is there. Even characters that we thought were gone, like Sam and Tormund, they're also there. For some reason, Edmund Tully is there as well. Even Robin and characters like Yara, who we didn't think we'd ever see again, they are on this council, and they're trying to come to a decision of who exactly is going to, be in line now, who is going to, be the king and queen. Obviously, they don't have an Iron Throne, but they still need someone to lead. And we get this really weirdly comedic scene of everyone really trying to decide what to do. You got Edmund Tully, who almost steps in, but Sansa quickly shuts him down, which thank God. I honestly forgot that Tobias Menzies was even in this show, because we haven't really seen him that much, but seeing him here, it took me a second. I was like, oh yeah, that's totally. I forgot kind of who that was. You have Sam, who proposes a democracy, but everyone kind of just laughs it off and things like that. I will say it was cool to see all of these characters come back, especially characters that we thought were gone, like, say, Sam and Yara and Tormund, and I definitely did appreciate that, and I also appreciated what they were trying to say, because basically, Grey Worm thinks that he is, in this authoritative position, but everyone's telling him, your queen is dead, you don't get a say on this. He wants to sentence Jon to death, but they're telling him that, no one else wants that. They know what everyone wants, and Tyrion comes up with this idea that basically, every single ruler that have been, lords and lordesses of, Westeros, they've all been born that way. They've all been heirs to the king or the queen, and they were basically groomed to fulfill that position, and that's who they were. We know, obviously, Joffrey and Tommen were two characters to think of, and as, Tyrion points out, that hasn't really turned out very well. I mean, obviously, Joffrey was a brat, Tommen was just kind of not a very good king, so obviously there needs to be some kind of change. So what he decides to do is now, it's not going to be you are born to become king, it's that someone can choose who to become king. It's not, who is destined. It's who wants to choose to be king. And I get what he was trying to say, that because of the legacy and things like that, that's what he wanted. But him appointing Bran is really what I have a problem with. And again, I get what he's trying to say in that speech, that, we all love a good story, and Bran is omniscient in that way, where he holds a lot of stories, and he's able to see all of these visions and things like that. So I get that. I do understand that, but Bran as a character has not been relevant in this series for a long time now. I mean, pretty much since he became the Three-Eyed Raven, that's been his entire role. He only shows up when the plot demands it, and even this season, I mean, the only thing he really had was, like, that stuff with Theon, which was great, but he really did not have that much to do. And look, again, I understand that none of the other Starks really wanted. Sansa, she really only wanted Winterfell. Jon said before, he didn't want it. He was very adamant about that, and I think he still would have been adamant about it. Obviously, Arya didn't want it. But for Jon not to even have a chance at the throne, that was very surprising to me. That's definitely not something that I was expecting. Now, obviously, after killing Daenerys, that makes sense, but I at least thought that Jon was going to have a chance, and then he would abdicate it and then give it to, say, Gendry, because Gendry was the person in waiting. Remember, he told Arya, sure, Daenerys named him, he was going to be the Master of Storm's End and things like that, and that's something that he was going to do. But because of the fact that Daenerys is gone, I mean, he could have easily been in that position. He wasn't even in the council. Like, I don't know why Gendry wasn't there, but that was a little weird to me. But honestly, even with all of that, which again, I do understand what they were trying to do here, but in the way that people say that there was no provocation that Daenerys should turn evil and that she would turn towards that way, which I do think there was. I think there was definitely quite a lot hinted at it. I think the fact that she lost basically everyone, that should be provocation of, even though, like I said, I don't think they did enough with that in this episode. I legitimately don't think there is any provocation for why Bran is qualified for this position. It just does not make sense to me. And again, I understand that Tyrion views him as someone who is omniscient and things like that, and that he's trying to say that Bran, he was pushed out of a window and nobody thought he would ever recover, and in a sense he hasn't, but I just don't understand how all of that leads up to Bran now being the head of Westeros. It doesn't make sense to me. The fact that everyone just went along with it and said yes, I just don't buy it. I don't buy that everyone would just be so okay with this. I mean, even Davos, said, I don't really get a vote here, but sure, yes. I mean, I didn't believe it, especially since Sansa did not seem like she was for the idea, essentially, and now the fact that she is, it didn't work for me. And also, I was kind of conflicted as to whether or not thought Bran wanted, because yes, in a sense, he said to Tyrion, like, you know, why else do you think I came all this way? But then he says to him, I don't really want to be king. So, like, the whole idea of choosing who you want to be king and it being something that, you know, someone wants and not something that is, you know, something that was sort of like ascribed to them, that whole sort of thing doesn't even work, because it didn't really seem like Bran wanted it. But he basically makes this compromise where Tyrion is now going to be his hand, which you know that Tyrion doesn't really want, but he takes it anyway. And I think that is a satisfying direction for Tyrion, because sure, when he was with Joffrey, he was pushed around, he hated it. Obviously, he was hand to Daenerys, but this is something that he genuinely does want. He thinks Bran's going to be a very good leader, and okay, that's a good direction for him. But Bran as a king, I just don't have a lot of faith in him. I mean, we see at his last scene in this episode is him basically saying, yeah, so my first act as king is going to be me trying to track down Drogon and me possibly warging into him, and that's all he's going to do. Like, if he's going to be an absentee king, why would you ever think that this would be a suitable position? I just don't see what was going through Tyrion's head there. I don't understand what they were trying to do, and I'm sorry, I can't get behind it. I've tried the best I can to try to figure out, you know, why would Bran be right for this, but I can't. I do not see a logical explanation for how any of this makes sense. I did like the way things ended here with, you know, all of the, basically all of the heads coming together. You know, you have Tyrion, you have Brienne, who is now finally the knight she's always wanted to be. Podrick is there as well, so they can continue their training, of course. I like getting to see Sam there. Sam has now made this book, which is literally called The Song of Ice and Fire. They're basically pulling like a Lord of the Rings there. I did think it was funny when he basically said to Tyrion that, like, he didn't have any mention in the book whatsoever. And I did like the moment I loved, and I did think was very satisfying, is when Brienne is writing Jaime's name. You know, she sees Jaime's page in the book, and she decides to add on to it that he was this hero and that he died protecting his queen. And I thought it was a very, very satisfying scene. It shows that even though Brienne knows that I think she wanted a future with Jaime, she knows that he did love Cersei, and that's something that she, you know, does admire. She admires the fact that he died with her. She admires the fact that he did want to be with Cersei, and I think she definitely... Again, I think there's a part of her that wishes that there was something there for her and Jaime, and it seemed like there was a possibility, but I did like that. I did think that was a good ending, and I like the fact that she's trying to sort of carry his legacy and not make him out to be just another one of the Lannisters and make him out to be more of a hero, and I do like seeing that overall. So that was really good, but the last scene of all of them in the house and Tyrion moving all those chairs, it was a weird way to end things. It was very odd. I feel like they definitely could have done more there. Again, I really was surprised that, something else I was surprised about is that we didn't even see Gilly. Like, Sam, obviously, I know Sam's not going to... you know, he has to be there because of Gilly being pregnant, but I at least thought we'd get a scene of, like, since there was a time jump, of maybe Sam and Gilly's baby or something like that, but we didn't even see her. Like, I don't know if Hannah Murray was busy, but she's the only actress, that is, you know, alive currently in the show that we didn't see in this episode, and that was very odd to me. I don't know what was going on there, but that was very weird. Also, Tormund not having a line of dialogue. Again, these are little things, but it did bother me. This scene itself, it felt off. It didn't feel like all was right. It felt like they made a mistake here, and I don't know if that's what they were trying to do, but it just wasn't very satisfying when you have appointed Bran into this position, and then the next second he's like, oh, I'm gonna go off and find Drogon, and then we'll just, you know, we'll settle things like brothels and things that are very trivial, like not really stuff that they need to focus on. What they need to focus on is rebuilding and restoring order, and I mean, the wheel has already been broken in that sense, but now they need to restore it. Now they need to build that better world. Which, I mean, that was something that Dany was trying to do, but obviously she was going to genocidal levels, and obviously they weren't going to do that, but that's what they should be focused on. It just, I don't know, I wasn't very happy with the way things ended there overall. It seemed very messy to me, and I just do not there's things I can understand this episode, but I just cannot wrap my head around this decision of making Bran king. The whole thing just doesn't make sense. He never really had that big of a role in the show, and rewatching it, it just makes the whole whole idea of these, you know, siblings vying for the Iron Throne and all these characters wanting it, it makes it feel a lot less interesting, and it just doesn't really work for me. That being said, I really like what they did with the three Starks, though. I thought the way they ended things off was really good, because obviously Jon, he's now being held prisoner by Grey Worm. He is not, you know, even eligible now to be a candidate for the Iron Throne. Nobody wants him to be on there. But Sansa and Arya, all of them, they are precluding Grey Worm from sentencing him to death. So basically, Tyrion comes up with this idea, which this one I did think made sense. Tyrion made one mistake, but this one I did think makes sense. Basically, he is going to send Jon back to the Night's Watch. And at the surface, this idea does feel very harsh. I mean, the fact that he can't have a wife, he can't father children, yeah, it is very sad. But honestly, after everything Jon has been through, I don't really think he wants that. I don't think he ever wanted that, to be honest. I mean, sure, I do think there was a time where he was considering a future with, you know, Ygritte, and he was considering a future with Dany. But obviously, after seeing both of them die, having to kill one of them and then the other one dying, obviously, I don't think Jon is going to get over that. I think he doesn't really want to be in a relationship after this, and honestly, I think Jon was happiest when he was with the Night's Watch. That's when he was with Tormund. That's how he met Sam. Now, obviously, he's not going to be with Sam, because Sam's now in King's Landing, but this is where Jon was happiest. This is where Jon lived out his glory days. Jon has never been a guy who wanted to be on the throne. Jon is never someone who wanted that kind of position. He is a guy who, again, he's an oath keeper. He's someone who is a fighter in that way, and he wants to be remembered as such. And I think, like I said, him going back to the wildlings, I think even if Tyrion hadn't pitched him this idea, he still would have done that. I think that would have been something that Jon would have done regardless. So this does make sense to me. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, why couldn't he have just come back after Grey Worm, since Grey Worm left anyway, which what happened to the Dothraki, it's very unclear. I don't really know where they're going at this point, but they really are not, they basically are defeated. They don't really have much of a purpose anymore, but I do think it makes sense that Jon does go off to the wildlings, and I was okay with that. And the same goes for Sansa and Arya. Sansa, it made sense, obviously. She's never really wanted the Iron Throne, so I really like the fact that she does decide to become the Queen of the North. I thought that was a very satisfying scene. The costumes and things like that, all of that was spot on, and I thought they did a very good job with that for sure, and I definitely really did appreciate that. And then seeing Arya as well, hers was probably the most satisfying, where basically she decides that because of all the carnage and just all of the bad blood that has gone on in Westeros, I mean, going back as far as seeing her father beheaded, and, you know, all witnessing the Red Wedding and things like that. I mean, Westeros just leaves a bad taste in her mouth. So what's she gonna do? She's gonna try to see what is outside of Westeros. No one has really been able to. She's gonna come across there, and she's basically gonna go find herself. And again, it's her taking the Hound's words to heart. It's her remembering what he said to her. She's going to find her purpose, and I really like the way that was, you know, that was concluded. I think out of all the characters this season, at least for me, Arya has been the most satisfying. Arya, for me, has been the character that throughout this entire season has been the most consistent, and this was definitely no exception for sure. I did like the cross-cutting between the three of them, you know, all finally feeling that victory. Jon even gets to pet Ghost, which was great to see. I know a lot of people were complaining about that, but hey, he finally got to pet Ghost, so that's another advantage of him going back to the North and things like that. And I do like that the final shot of this episode echoes that of the first episode. I thought that was really masterfully done. I really did like the way that was handled, and that was satisfying to me overall. However, as it goes for the actual episode, no, I am not satisfied. I do think that there were some developments, so like I said, I really did like. I like the way things ended for Jon, Arya, and Sansa, and Tyrion. I thought those were satisfying, saying the stuff with Brienne. That was definitely really good. But as an episode, it just felt very underwhelming. I think if what they should have done, you know, again, I'm not the writers, but if I were to have, you know, done this episode, I would have taken the first, like I said, 25 to 30 minutes, put that at the end of last week, make last week's episode 2 hours, and then make this episode 2 hours as well and basically have it be like who is going to fulfill this position. This way they could have maybe gotten me behind the idea of Bran possibly, you know, leading. I don't know if they would have been able to do that, but I think they would have been able to spend more time. And that's the thing. They're just, a lot of the characters, they didn't really have as much to do here. Really, a lot of them only got like 1 or 2 lines, which was very unsatisfying. And just overall, I needed more. I needed more here, and I just felt very underwhelmed. I loved the stuff in the beginning of the episode. I thought that was definitely very well done. But even, especially the hard cut between seeing Jon killing Daenerys and then immediately this time jump and things are now more lighthearted and fun, it just didn't work for me. I needed more of Jon's devastation. I needed more of Jon's regret. We didn't really get to see that much. I needed to see more of Jon reuniting in Winterfell and maybe him talking to Sansa and Arya. I needed to see more of that overall. And just in general, I just needed more. It just didn't feel very eventful. It didn't feel like the finale that we all really wanted this to be. To a show that has basically been the equivalent of, you know, the equivalent of like Lord of the Rings or something like that. This did not feel that way. This did not feel like that's what they were trying to do. I like the ideas that they did here and the ambition was good, but just in general, I needed a lot more from this episode. Also, I mean, I hate talking about this again, but the water bottle, seriously guys, like, that right there just shows you they did not care. They wanted to rush this out as quickly as possible, and I just don't understand how careless mistakes like this are just getting past Benioff and Weiss. It just seems like they wanted to rush this out. It very much seemed like they just wanted to do the bare minimum of what was required, and that's my biggest problem with this finale. A lot of the season as well, that's my problem, but mainly this finale, it just left a rather, not a sour taste, but just just really no taste at all. Like, I didn't really feel a lot here. I did feel, like I said in the beginning with Tyrion, and I like the scene with Jon and Daenerys. I thought that was perfection. But everything after that, I just thought was very rushed and very just swiftly handled. It seemed like they were trying to get things done as quickly as possible, and it just didn't really work for me. So overall, as a finale, I really was not that satisfied by it. And I am going to give the series finale of Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 6, the Iron Throne, a C+. But now, guys, what I'm going to do is something that might be a little bit jarring to you guys, but as I said before, I did record a review last night, and some of it I was happy with. So rather than me just coming on here talking about the season, I'm actually going to use that footage that I already recorded, mainly because I'm happy with it. I liked what I said there. I don't really have anything different in terms of that, except for my overall grade with this season. That's really the only thing that's changed. So I'm just going to cut right to that. It is going to come back to me at the very end of this, obviously, but I don't really have a lot to add on to my overall thoughts with the season because I basically already said it last night. So now, cut to last night. But now, guys, I really do want to talk about the season as a whole, which a lot of what I just said in the finale, a lot of that applies to this season. And there's a lot of things that, you know, I'm going to echo a lot of things that I've already said. I'm sure you guys are tired of me saying it, but I still do want to talk about it. So, if talking about this season as a whole, look, I still did think this season was pretty great. I thought there were a lot of things that they did handle very well, particularly all the stuff with Jon, Daenerys, and the Starks. I thought all of that was played out very well. You got a sense of who Jon was and how he was kind of conflicted throughout the whole season. You know, do I want to be with Daenerys or do I side with my family? You know, is this something that I really am interested in? Is the Iron Throne something I'm interested in? I thought that was a very good arc, and I thought Jon worked as kind of the main character of this entire season. They did a very good job with that overall. You know, you understood his rationale, you understood where he was coming from, and that was something that they did handle quite well here. And I was overall impressed by that. And that stuff I thought was handled quite well. And everything up till, I would say, the Battle of Winterfell, I was overall satisfied with. I like seeing, say, Jaime and Tyrion reunite, and them talking about better times in their life and them kind of recalling past memories. Jaime starting to treat Brienne more like an individual was really nice to see. I liked the feuding between Sansa and Daenerys and how even though those two were not seeing eye to eye, they were willing to bury the hatchet because of their love and affection for Jon and how much they cared about him. And I thought that was very good. I love the stuff with Arya and the Hound. I like seeing Arya not be afraid of death and things like that. I thought all of that stuff was set up very well. But once the Battle of Winterfell came, that's when I started to think, you know what? Yeah, this is kind of rushed. There's a lot more stuff they could have done there. I think, honestly, that should have been 2 episodes. There was so much they could have done with that battle, and I think the main reason why people are disappointed is not because of the way it was done. I think the idea of Arya killing the Night King, no, it's not my ideal scenario. I mean, I would have wanted that to be Jon for sure, but I do think there was a way they could have written it where it made sense. Similar to Daenerys' turn, it was something that we could have gone behind, but because it was only 1 episode, I think we just needed more time there. I think that should have been 2 episodes overall. I think Daenerys, wanting to go into King's Landing and, rush it all. I think that should have been 2 episodes too. I think the first episode should have been them, the party and everything, and them celebrating their victory, and then end that episode with Daenerys' request. We play out the next episode, and then we get to see, how everyone feels, and then it can end the same way that episode 4 did. And I think overall would just have been a lot more satisfying. And like I said, this finale, again, should have been 2 episodes. And I really do think overall, if this season was 10 episodes, a lot of the things that didn't make sense to me would make a lot more sense, particularly the Lannister stuff. I don't know what was going on there. Jaime's arc of this season was all kinds of all over the place. I don't really know what they were trying to do. 1 second, it seemed like he wanted to be with Brienne. He even had a conversation with Tyrion where he was generally at least to me, it seemed like he was generally considering a future with her and that he could actually have a good life and be able to get away from, the errors of his past, but then he decides to go back to Cersei, and I don't understand what they were trying to do. It should have been him wanting to kill Cersei. It would have made far more sense if he wanted to do that, and then realized that she was actually pregnant, and then decided not to. That I would have been far more satisfied with, but they did not handle that well, and it really made the whole Jaime and Brienne stuff fairly pointless. I like the idea, again, of her honoring his legacy and making it seem like he was a hero, but still, I don't know what the point of that arc was. I mean, it just seemed very like, oh yeah, we'll just throw that in there, and that was one of those things where it felt like they had a good idea, Benioff and Weiss. They had a very good idea, but they wanted to rush it out. They didn't want to take the time and really, develop that story. And I think, again, if you would have taken 2 episodes, then I could have gone behind that more, and then I think it would have made far more sense, because I was into the idea of Jaime and Brienne, but then they did the thing last episode, and it didn't really make any sense to me, so that really didn't work. And again, this ending with Bran, I think that could have worked too if you had devoted more time to the overall story. If you would have focused more on Bran, then I think his sort of, him essentially, leading the Seven Kingdoms would have made a lot more sense. I mean, hell, you have this line where Gendry talks about how he has a place on the throne and that he could possibly be on the throne and that he kind of is the default option. Why didn't we even bring that up in this episode? That's not even something that really came up, and I was a little bit disappointed by that. So, yeah, while I do think the season was pretty great, I mean, from an acting perspective, I mean, it's the best it's ever been. Emilia Clarke, Peter Dinklage, Nikolaj Coster-Waldau, Gwendoline Christie, Kit Harington, Maisie Williams, Sophie Turner. They were all fantastic this season. Everyone did a fantastic job acting-wise. I am definitely not going to complain there. In terms of cinematography, I mean, holy shit, it's game-changing stuff, especially the last episode, just the point of view shots and the tracking and stuff like that. All of that was so great, and I love the way that was done. That definitely no complaints in the technical department. And again, the story they're telling, I am not upset with. I like this idea of Daenerys turning towards evil, and I thought it made sense why they did that. It's just, they needed to spend more time there. They needed to do more for this to feel overall like a complete season, because really at the end of the day, it just feels shortened. It feels like there's stuff they did here that I like, and that's why my grade for this season is higher than you may expect it to be, because of the fact that I like the choices that they made. Minus the Jamie stuff. That I do not like. I will tell you right now, I do not like that, and I don't know what they were thinking there. But other than that, I do like what they were trying to accomplish, and I do understand the story they were trying to tell. I just think it was such a drastic shift that they needed more time to tell that story, and I think if they would have made it 2 hours or something like that, or made the season 10 episodes, that just would have benefited this show more overall, because, look, we got 4 nearly perfect seasons of television, you know, seasons 4, seasons 3, season 7, season 3, season 4, season 6 are all great. All of those seasons are perfect. The first 2 seasons of what I've seen, because I actually haven't seen a lot of the first 2 seasons, but of what I've seen, they are definitely really great for sure. So at least we can say that. No, these last 2 seasons might not have been what you wanted them to be. I do think that they were a little bit rushed, but for what they were, I still was enjoying it. I still thought it was very well done. I still was overall intrigued. There was never a point in the show where I was bored. There was never a point in the show where I'm like, I don't really think I like where this is going at all. Like, I was like that at first with the Daenerys stuff, but even that I was buying into. But that being said, I don't think there's a single episode this season, minus maybe A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, you know, the episode that is more of downtime before the Battle of Winterfell. Minus that episode, I don't think there's a single episode this season that is perfectly paced. There are things, like I said, the Jamie and Brienne stuff, I need to see more of that. Daenerys turning evil, I need to see a little bit more of that in this finale. Even stuff like Jon telling Sansa and Arya about his true parentage, I wanted to see their reaction. That's something that we needed to see, and the fact they didn't, it just lessened the impact overall. But at the end of the day, I still really did love the season. There's a lot of risky stuff that I very much do appreciate. The ambition, I mean, they definitely did a very good job with that. It's just the way it was executed, it was not as great as I think it could have been, and I think that's why a lot of people are very harsh. I am trying not to be as harsh because there are so many things I do like, and at the end of the day, the positives really do outweigh the negatives. The things that this season did that were great are great, and there's no denying that for me, but there are things that I do think could have been a lot better that I've already touched upon. So overall, guys, I am going to give this season of Game of Thrones overall a B. So overall, guys, that's it. Game of Thrones has come to a conclusion. Like I said, I don't really feel as satisfied as I really could. But here's the thing. Look, despite how you feel about this season, which, like I said, I am a fan of this season overall, even though there's quite a few missteps for sure. There were a lot of things that I think were definitely holding it back. It doesn't ruin the legacy of the show. I mean, look, this show came out at a time when something like this just wasn't ever achieved. Nobody ever thought something like this was possible. HBO tried it with Rome. It didn't work out. And the fact that it actually has worked out with this show in itself is fantastic. And I feel like that's something that we often take for granted. Because we are so used to the scope of the show, we often take for granted just how groundbreaking it really was for TV. Because it was. I mean, there was never anything like this. I don't know if there'll ever be anything like this again. I'm sure there'll be things around that try to replicate what Game of Thrones did, but I don't think any of them will ever be as successful as what Game of Thrones has achieved. I don't know if they'll ever go on as long as Game of Thrones have, but either way, what a hell of a ride for sure. What a way to end things off. And like I said, I do think that despite how anyone feels about this season, it does not take away this show's legacy. It does not at all taint what this show was setting up. There definitely are things now where, yeah, you can look back and they might not mean as much. They might feel a little less impactful, but still, this show, I mean, it's done a lot, and I do think it will be remembered in a positive light for the most part. But either way, guys, that's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I can't believe the show is really over. I just want to thank you guys if you have stuck with me until, you know, basically since season 4. That's when I started reviewing the show. Hats off to you, because those reviews are really rough. I mean, I watch them back, and I literally had no idea what I was talking about back then. So if you've been there since then, I mean, I can't thank you guys enough, because I really do adore this show. It definitely does deserve deserve all the praise it's gotten, despite these last few seasons being a little bit rocky for me. Overall, though, I still think that this is a very well done show. I still really do love what the show has accomplished. Either way, though, guys, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought of this finale overall. Love your thoughts on it. What do you think of this season? Did it ruin the show for you? I mean, I know that people have been very vocal about their detest towards this season. I want you guys to be honest. I do want to hear your thoughts for sure. I really would love to have a civil conversation, but it seems that that's kind of hard to do, but I'd love to do it. I'd love to have a civil conversation with you guys about, you know, how the season turned out for you, all that kind of stuff, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and then we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.